Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Oxford Business Insights podcasts. I'm really excited to introduce to you Peter Leyland of Sibelius. He's the CEO, and Sibelius is a natural products company that has a very interesting history. It started out life as an Oxford University spinout and redefining the science of nutraceuticals. We'll learn a little bit more about what that means on the way through. We're going to be talking about innovation generally, bioavailability and artificial intelligence, a business expanding from Oxford internationally, particularly into the US, and the evolution from essentially a research-led organization into a manufacturing organizations. So we're going to learn things from sugar plantations to spinouts, and Peter's history before he started Sibelius is every bit as fascinating. So we'll talk about global healthcare with Peter over a good few years, if you don't mind me saying, but it's a fascinating career history. Peter, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning to you.
Hello. Okay, well, you started out life as sort of really as a healthcare executive before you became the entrepreneur that you are now. So tell us a little bit about your early career and how you decided to go into this sort of the healthcare world.
My career really started at Newcastle University. I undertook a life science degree, particularly focusing on botany and agriculture. So I had a sort of a background of, if you like, of growing things. And I was very fortunate. I got picked up in the milk run to become a graduate management trainee with British Sugar.
Right.
And one of the beauties of British Sugar were two things. Is first, you were assigned to sort of an academic mentor to sort of guide you into a company like British Sugar, and then the second is, of course, British Sugar was the first company ever to be privatized under Ted Heath when we joined the common market. And the UK government, or British Council part of it, considered British Sugar still to be part of their extended family, and so called upon them if they had specific global assignments. Well, I enjoyed my first couple of years at British Sugar, working in the fields as a fieldman in sugar beet, etc. But I think my mentor and the company recognized I had a more outwardly looking view of the global world than most of my colleagues. And so I joined British Sugar Developments, which was this arm that the British Council engaged with. And over about a 3-year period, I had engagements in Syria, in the Euphrates Valley, 2 years in East Africa, all 3 of the countries, and also one specific project in the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Those were enjoyable. They were very much sort of up my street. A very sort of global, traveling, enjoying meeting people as one does. But my academic mentor, who probably should have said this, is Peter, I think you need to move on from British Sugar. He was a professor at UMIST at the time, University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, and he said, Peter, you really ought to go to business school.
Right.
Not UMIST, but you need to go to Manchester Victoria to Manchester Business School, which I thought also was very brave of him, given now you probably know that the two are now combined, but at the time there was academic tension between the two. So I went to Manchester. I undertook it's a 2-year program, which I wanted to do. I wanted to use the time wisely. I got heavily involved. And I realized that I still had this bug about globalization.
Right.
And actually, my specialization was the globalization of industrial products. Okay. And I chose, having done my internship with Thorn EMI Lighting, TELC, in Enfield, I wanted to write my thesis on the globalization of the stadia lighting industry.
Okay.
I thought it was an interesting idea. It got me to live in New York while I wrote it. I spent most of my time in the Central Library in New York. I had great fun, enjoyed it, worked hard, and I was very fortunate. I did well. I got a distinction for that. And so when it came to my next milk run, a company called was called Travenol Laboratories at the time. It became Baxter very soon after I joined it, because it did a reverse takeover of American Hospital Supply. Asked if I would join as the executive assistant to the president, very similar to a graduate trainee program, and euphemistically called the bag boy by the internal constituents. But it was a very similar program. You had a year in many ways to find the job you wanted within the company, and you had pretty free rein to do that. Because I'd arrived almost to the day that Baxter became live, Travenol Laboratories doing reverse takeover of American Hospital Supply, I probably had 8 or 9 divisions to I'll use the words, play with. And I picked the orthopedic division as the one that I wanted to work with. Was that a commercial decision, or were you interested in orthopedics? It was the one that inspired me the most. You asked, in some respects, we'll get to why entrepreneurship became important. Right. The beauty of the orthopedics division is it specifically was related to keyhole surgery, arthroscopy as it's known today. Now, why would a company like Baxter do that? Well, if you go back to some of its history, its basic business was Edwards Lifesciences, who used to make heart valves from porcine and cow-based materials. And they really wanted to develop a series of implants based on natural materials. Got you. But with natural materials, you really had to work fast. You couldn't open the knee up and spend an hour going into it, which you can do with carbon fiber materials and others. So it was a fantastic opportunity within a large company to be an entrepreneur, because really we were introducing arthroscopy for the first time in the UK. The only country in Europe that really had developed it was Belgium. Okay. And you've got to remember, this was the time where you didn't even have cameras. So the poor orthopedic surgeon was having to bend over looking down a scope to do his work. The tools were not very well developed. And the beauty of Baxter was that we developed very high power tools. We came up with 3-chip cameras and a whole range of instruments, not because we particularly wanted to do arthroscopy better, but we wanted to be able to bring these ingredients into the process of operation. So it was really that first stage of how do you sort of bring some new technology into the healthcare system. So I didn't realize how instrumental that was at the time. That went extremely well. I got access to some really powerful surgeons in the United States. I spent a lot of time in the United States to do this, to bring this into Europe, and I sort of got plucked to expand the business to become the operating room division. Okay. So Peter, you're used to being in the operating room. Well, you must know all about it. Well, of course they didn't. So we got inverted into drapes and gowns and all sorts of different operations and involved. And again, that I have to say went well. Again, it was very interesting for me because I was the cutting edge of all sorts of things coming into the operating theatre arena. Happily moving along, and then suddenly I got this call by a new president, a lady, her name's Gail Gormer. I said, Peter, we would like you to come over to the renal division. I thought, that's an interesting one. So you've taken me from one of the smallest divisions to say, well, we'd like you to now work on one of the biggest ones, and certainly the most profitable division that existed. And she said, they really need to be woken up a bit. They need somebody who'll go in and, in her view, kick ass, but, because they're too complacent. So I became the head in the UK, principally, it goes on globally further, of the renal division. And what Gail said is that if you can meet certain goals with this group, kick them out of this torpor, then we will, I'd like to reward you. because I'd like you then to come over to the United States, because you won't be able to stay there long. If you are successful, you won't be able to stay long.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you can do local marketing at the local level. You can do regional marketing with Europe, which you're kind of doing, but you won't be able to do global marketing in the UK. So if you're successful in doing what we're asking you to do, we will bring you to the global marketing team in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we'll have you here for 3 years, and we'll spend 18 months doing what it was basically market research and communication element. Yeah. And then the other part is about really about strategy and new product development, working with the R&D team. So fantastic opportunity as a still relatively young Brit person to be in the United States, getting access to really the core of how a business operates. So again, it's the next aspect of why entrepreneurship and startups start to be there, because was involved in the messaging, the development, and how to create the project status for creating new businesses. I then was asked to come back to Europe. I went to Belgium and was asked to then bring some of that knowledge from global into regional marketing, and then ultimately to the UK. And then I got UK, Ireland, Nordics, Baltics as my responsibility. Now, without being funny, and it's not to be clear, I almost got bored.
Right.
It was too easy.
Yeah.
Now, that's a terrible thing to say, but it's truthful. And I wanted to move on to something slightly more, and I use the word slightly more challenging.
Yeah.
So I actually applied for a job in Belgium for the hemodialysis division, which was the ultimate problem child within Baxter. Is nobody knew how to run it. I can't say I did at the time. I really didn't know how to do it. It was the least profitable. It wasn't growing, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, I thought I'd apply for it. I'd signal that I'd quite like to move in the next year or two. I got the job. Much to my surprise and family, we all moved back to Belgium. And within a year, there had been a major Paris coup in Chicago. Right. In the existing management team that I'd grown fond of and enjoyed very much got completely wiped out, and the board decided to put a load of pharmaceutical people in those senior positions. So and they always wanted everybody who has a global responsibility in Chicago.
Yeah. Went
back to Chicago. I because I'm a medical device person, pretty much through and through. I fought with them like hell, because they had no idea. They probably thought I had no idea.
Yeah.
They had no idea. And it was only really right at the end of my tenure did the president say, Peter, you were right. We really didn't understand what you were trying to say. And for example, when you have a very unprofitable business in the normal traditional way, look at it like a supermarket shelf.
Yeah.
It's about turnover. It's about the profit you make over the year on that shelf, not how much profit you make per loaf of bread you sell. And it really was very difficult to get that message over. But ultimately, it was done. And then I had a strange call from the president, who was my president of the orthopedics division. This is now many years before. He said, Peter, I've got a startup and I've got a number of them, and I'd really like you to consider coming to join me down in Palo Alto as a spinout of Stanford University. And this was specializing in replacing bone with people who had bone cancer and various other methods. It was related to supporting people who had failed implants, orthopedic implants, etc. And I had a really long think about it, and I realized that my career certainly in Baxter in the United States, was going to end at some point.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to keep an expat on the salary I was on, when there were plenty of US young people coming through. They recruited a lot from various business schools. And I thought that I really couldn't see an opportunity for me to come back to the UK with at that point and at that level, because we just don't have that many bits. Yes, we have Smith and Nephews, et cetera, but they're kind of more specialized than the Baxter career. So I went to Palo Alto, and again, I got the job. I was under, again, a degree of mentorship in this novel role for me as a startup CEO. He was the first one to sort of guide me through what I call the funding process and all of those different areas. Quite by chance, I went to a conference, an orthopedic conference in Austin, and I was sitting in the audience, and I heard this very English voice behind me, and I swiveled a bit like The Exorcist, and got to meet this person, and we got talking. And he said he had an opportunity back in the UK for a CEO for a spin out of Harefield Cardiac Hospital.
Right.
So went home, had a talk about it, and we got 2 children. Both are at that sort of delicate age that either you decide to stay in America forever, or you have to move very soon.
Yeah.
And we decided, even though one of them, the younger one, was a US citizen, we really had to make that decision. And we decided that my wife and I, we were at the older age for wanting to be, starting life again.
Yeah.
We had life and family back in the UK. So we decided that I would interview for the position at this cardiac spinout. Again, I got the position, moved back to our home here in Oxford, where we still are. 28 odd years later.
Well,
and the spinout was based on Marshall's Airfield in Cambridge.
Okay.
So it gave me access to the sort of the Cambridge infrastructure at that time. And so we're back in the UK. We were working on something called it was a cardiac assist device that supported hearts that were failing, and in the end we sold it to a Biomed, the big heart company. So that sort of moved me along and said, well, okay, now I've got to find something else. And by that time I was reasonably well known within the community, what they tend to look for as a big commercial career. The transition has already been done, and of course I'd done too. So I then went through a period of a number of CEO positions in startups. The next one was Sir Christopher Evans, Professor Sir Christopher Evans OBE, where he was looking at developing a number of companies within a startup framework. I thought one of them had a good chance, but in the end, fundraising at that particular time hadn't been as productive, and there were some sort of issues behind things there. Right. But I actually really liked working with him. I think most people talk about it in one way, but I actually enjoyed Chris. I thought he was a really excellent person, again, to learn from. He's been a fantastic entrepreneur. That's where sort of the entrepreneur bit. There's probably no spin-out entrepreneur that's done more for our industry than Chris. So again, blessed with sort of that knowledge. So became available and was looking around Oxford, and became the CEO of Oxford. Became the CEO of a company called Penlon in Abingdon, an anesthesia company. And that was interesting because that was the first one that was not just a startup. It was it was more of a mini Baxter, if you like,
Okay.
in that it had all of the components of R&D, manufacturing, etc. It was run out of private equity from New York, but it was challenging. Its technology was pretty third world. It did extremely well in the third world.
Right.
And I had this plan to try and enhance the technology, bring the equipment up to a newer point, but we were cash limited. So I suggested that we split the company in two, between the anesthesia delivery and the medical gas company. And the medical gas company was easily sold to Atlas Copco PLC. There was quite a substantial amount of money, but the PE people decided they want to keep the money and take it back to New York rather than
investing it in the other side.
In the other side. So my tenure was pretty short after that. And it was then quite rightly then going to be run by an accountant.
Right.
Rather, there was no element of trying to grow it any further. And I know history that the accountant then sold it on 2 or 3 years later to an Indian company, which is much more suitable in terms of the products and the markets, etc. And it's gone on to do well. And I will say that what Penlon still had at the time during COVID, it became one of the major people creating products for the NHS and did so very successful for breathing apparatus. So after Penlon, I then became the CEO. No, I became the number 2 at Oxford Biomedica, Oxford Biosignals Medical on Milton Park.
Yeah.
The CEO, there was a great guy who was French. He was starting to want to go home.
Right.
And it became that he said, Peter, look, you're the natural person to take on my position. So he handed in his notice and I got asked to become the CEO. I really, again, enjoyed the R&D, the early sales, the early commercialization, and we made good strides in Japan, of all countries, which has one of the most difficult R&D regulatory systems. But I obviously didn't fit very well with the majority owner.
Right.
And I got called in to sort of be let go for somebody else. It happens. That's what you live with in this business. But I was very fortunate that the senior NED didn't like the decision. Right. And he rang me 2 days later and said, well, Peter, I have an opportunity at Oxford University spinout that you might be interested in. And which at the time it was, which is now the company I'm still with 9 years later, Sibelius Natural Products. And when I looked on the website, I couldn't believe that they would be interested in me. I couldn't see any fit whatsoever with the business at all, to the point that I immediately before the interview, I signed up for a course on epigenetics at Melbourne University in Australia, just to sort of see if I could at least sound half smart about what I could read on their website. And frankly, by about week 5, it was so far over my head. I thought, Peter, this is, you've got to respect Chris's introduction. And I went to the interview, and this word epigenetics never came up. And they were asking me, had I fundraised? Had I been the CEO? Did I live near Oxford? All local hygiene questions in the traditional sense. And actually, by chance, I hit all 5. So I was offered the job. And I'm still going, well, I'm still not sure what you do, but in reality, the company had moved on a fair bit, and the website just hadn't been kept up. And in fact, Sibelius was a 3rd generation spin out of Oxford University. The first one being Oxford Biodynamics, which is now a public company. It looks into epigenetic testing for prostate, and colon cancer and other things. And it's just making its breakthrough. It's a public company. It then spun out a company called Kronos Therapeutics, which it no longer exists. It was subsumed into another company about 2 years ago, but it spun us out into space with our principal product being called Kronos Screen, based on Kronos Therapeutics. Don't ever do it again. Because what happens is that the first two companies were very much in pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And all of those investors were in the pharmaceutical industry. And while they got tax-free dividend shares, OBD to Kronos Screen and then Kronos Screen to Sibelius, in hindsight, we had a huge lump of investors who had invested only in the first company and got tax-free shares, to the point now we're sort of a nutraceutical company. What's a nutraceutical? I'm no interest in this. Well, I got these shares for free. We'll just let it go. So we have this large rump of people who have no interest in the company, no interest in investing in it, and yet is a huge impediment for any new investor coming in, because they see their money being diluted amongst people who are really passengers, in their words. I have to be careful, not mine. So it's been a really, really difficult road to go down in raising money. And we have a couple of really great investors who've stuck with us, even though they've come along this path, but they are very limited in number and have been incredibly generous, probably more than they ever should have been. But so there we are. We have this Kronos Screen using C. elegans worms, and we're really a CRO.
Yeah.
And we were well received by very senior R&D people, perhaps board level people.
Peter, just for people who might not know the terminology here, there'll be some that might think CRO is Chief Revenue Officer. This is just
contract research organization.
Yeah.
So what we did is that we would be send materials from companies, R&D people in Japan and United States, whether they were for human or dog food. And what we were looking for is, will this material enhance lifespan?
Yeah.
And that's done through a worm called C. elegans worm model. And if you can show, because of its very short lifespan in general, that you can increase its lifespan, then that material has the capability of being able to enhance organisms' life.
Yeah.
And so it became a very early screen. Right. So what you were looking for were companies that were very active in developing new ingredients for new indications, and they wanted a tool that would allow them to discard at the cheapest, earliest phase. With time, that level of decision-making came down the cascade, and more junior people were not prepared to make that level of decision at the same rate and spend money getting there because of the inertia of job position. And we realized that with a CRO, you really have one-off hits. Yeah. And we'll come back to that point later as to how can you create revenue, long-term revenue in the CRO space. So what we moved then is that within this CRO work, we'd created a portfolio of over 800 ingredients of our own. We looked at them carefully and decided that we would take 2 of those forward ourselves. Yeah. So moving from CRO to being a new ingredient, new indication company. Now that's a long-term process. Right. And it's a lot of money, but ultimately it can be profitable. Yeah. Give it a scope. It's and we're not talking pharmaceutical numbers, but we're talking a 2 and a bit million to get you through that process, with the opportunity perhaps of getting 6 to 8 million 2 or 3 years later. So you have to think about the time value of money. Yeah. It still can fail, but sage was really successful. We really, this is Old English sage. It's grown near Highclere Castle. Yeah. And it was fantastic. And remembering that this was an ingredient that was in the Bodleian Library from the 14th century. The monks at Bury St Edmunds used to use it for the treatment of witchcraft. And it's all there in the Bodleian. In fact, you can go to see it still at Bury St Edmunds Abbey in the Pilgrim's Herbal Garden growing. So that's what we took forward, was Old English sage. Extremely, we did very well with it, particularly in Southeast Asia and a couple in the US. And we realized that we weren't in a position to raise money. But so what we did is we put the Old English Sage project up for sale. Unfortunately, it made good money, and that gave us a sum of money that allowed me to go to the board and say, look, we need to do something different. We can't just spend another 2 or 3 million and hope that something will come out of it. So I suggested to them, look, let's do a technology search globally, and let's really see if we can find something that exists or in a university whereby we can enhance all nutraceuticals. So let's not just make them ourselves, but can we look at technology that enhances all of them? And we identified 3 companies, one in Australia, which we came out of our price bracket and already has been snapped up by a larger company, an Indian company. There was one in Edinburgh, which again, in many respects, its processes would be too slow for the money available. And actually it went into administration about 3 months ago. And there was this small one within the Birmingham infrastructure, university infrastructure. One of the things that was becoming quite in vogue within our space in the last year was liposomal enhancing of bioavailability of nutraceuticals. But because of the sage and our experience, we had a lot of experience in Asia. But the problem there is that most of these companies that make liposomes, they either use ingredients that are not regulatory approvable, like silicon dioxide. So you can't sell them in Japan, and you can't make them in Singapore and sell them in Taiwan, et cetera, et cetera. So we knew there was that limit. And then the other thing, most liposomes are done through spray drying. Either it's heat or freeze drying. Now, conceptually, a liposome is a lipid ball around a nutritional thing. The temperature of going through the nozzle of a spray dryer is so high that actually you fracture the liposomes. So while you may have liposomes in this material, actually what you have is liposomes that are maybe fractured. So the material is not actually inside them. So you can't necessarily talk about that you're enhancing that bioavailability. But, people use the word, the loading factor is high, 40, 50, but actually the loading factor should be what's inside the liposome, not within the context within them, about them. So we recognize that this company in Birmingham was doing something completely different in creating liposomes that neither use silicon dioxide or any form of heat or freezing that would fracture the liposomes. So we proposed to the board that we went forward with looking at this acquisition, which they've agreed to do so. And we are now in the process of amalgamating Sibelius with a company called Lipoactive, Birmingham. And we already now have, when I last spoke, I think we had 2. I think we have 5 or 6 clients now.
Very good.
In this area, which we're moving forward with. And I call it as a CRO. So a contract research organization. People come to us and say, well, can you enhance our bioavailability? And we have created a range to show people. And the one that we chose most succinctly is lycopene. Lycopene is probably one of the most difficult because it's an oilier resin and very difficult to handle. But actually, we found that we could make it into the liposomes, and it actually itself has gone on to be successful and a wonderful subject for people to look at. Well, I think since we last spoke, I think we've now got 5 clients, not just the 2, because we've also extended the capability that we have having sort of attended a conference in Anaheim, which was Expo West, and was come recently back from supply side Vitafoods Asia, we recognize that an intermediate step for us is creating oils into dry powders.
Right.
Well, oils are difficult. They limit how you can deliver them. They limit the formulator's ability to create products, and that too has become a major component. So they have these two strings to our bow as a CRO.
Yep.
And if they like what we give them, and we know they're starting to do that, then you're the only people who can do that through patent protection, etc. We then create the CMO, the contract manufacturing operation for them of the CRO. So quite different from Chronoscreen, where we had no real follow-on. So again, lesson learned. Don't go into that CRO business unless you've got a continuous income stream to come following from it. So where we are now is that using the money that we got from the Sage sale is that we've looked at the implications for the business going forward. We're going to retain the R&D component within the Birmingham University ecosystem. It's really positive there. There's some good quality pharmacy students who can work. So it's a really nice place to have a place. So what we've started to do is looking for a contract manufacturing capability in the United States.
Right.
Why? Well, Mr. Trump is a good reason.
Yeah.
He has created tariffs in this space. The US is the largest market, and we believe that by creating or adding the value in the United States, we can be very competitive with the large Indian companies who make liposomes in different ways. And we've selected a couple of places to look at: Birmingham, Alabama, or Carthage in Missouri. And why Carthage? Well, Carthage has a very large food industry.
Okay.
And a lot of their people that we'd be interested in would work night shifts.
Right.
So we would have a natural draw if we were to have a capability in somewhere like Carthage, getting really talented people coming into the business. So that decision is still to be made on the location, but we will be moving to the United States. And in the interim, we have sufficient capacity in Birmingham to meet the current needs or the near-term future needs. But come Supply Side Global, which is the end of this month, my team are going to the locations to identify whether the locations we've identified will be appropriate locations. So if we get all that done, again, some additional funding to the Sage sale, we can see ourselves starting that process in January.
Very good.
Another reason for going to Supply Side Global is that there are one-day conference talks on grants and funds and etc. for people moving manufacturing capability to the United States. So we're going to be attending those one-day courses run by those. So that's most of that sort of transition, if you like, through my sort of career to where we are today. I think we have a great opportunity with really good technology. It's been a while in getting here, and I think I'm just so delighted for those shareholders who stuck with us along the path, because I think they can finally see that it's a point where it's all been worthwhile.
How long do you think it would take if things go broadly to plan? So in Q1 next year, you sort of establish where you're going to work from in the United States. How long will that take to get up and running?
We think it'll be about 9 months from January, where we will have our equipment is very modular.
Right.
So it's relatively inexpensive. Yeah. And what we found out is that one of the issues with people who have these really big bits of kit is, while they think it's very efficient, unfortunately, what it does mean is you have to have a lot of inventory to fill them to start with. You have to have a lot of inventory afterwards, and people just don't buy that level of product at one time. So, in fact, one of our things that we do is we will buy the ingredients, but not the raw material. So, if I'm working for you, you have to send me the material you want us to put into that material. We will not carry that inventory. You must do the buying of it. You must do the regulatory processes, and you just send it to us, and we will convert it and send it back to you. So again, as a small company, it was very efficient. The client will be doing that side of things for us.
Oh, I understand that. And how big's the company sort of as of now? Sort of with the people you now have in Birmingham, what you have in around Oxfordshire and elsewhere. How big's the company?
We have 8 at the moment.
Right.
We plan to add 2 in Birmingham, mainly to give the chief technical officer chance to get over to the States and train the people there. We think there will be 3 operators, technicians, if you like, in the factory, the unit. And one of those 2 I described as slightly more attractive because it already has an in-service laboratory within it. And as long as they are doing or have the capability of doing that, we will do that on a service basis. So, for example, if it's we put our equipment in there, what we would be happy to do is probably pay a cost per kilo produced for a full service equipment. To put our equipment in there, we'll pay a service fee on a per kilo basis. Why that becomes attractive is because then it becomes that company who operates it. It's in their interest for us to maximize the capacity, and therefore we're aligned on our goals for driving revenue. So
very good.
So fundraising. One of the challenges for Sibelius is that there is no real indigenous UK R&D base for nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
There really isn't. Yes, France, yes, Italy, yes, Spain, yes, almost anywhere else, but there's not really one in the UK. But what we did find is that people which we have in the UK in the tobacco industry, and they do lead in a lot of areas, we found that a useful source of talent. So, but there really is what we do have is growers. Yes, they grow things. We have processors and we have distributors, but we really have limited R&D capability at the nutraceutical ingredient level. Yes, we have them doing mixing and matching and formulating, but most of the ingredients, and of course, China and India are the 2 biggest suppliers globally. Yeah. So that in itself was a challenge in finding in good people. But we have, and I think we've got some excellent people, which I'll touch on in a few minutes when we get mentorship. So funding at the moment in the UK, because there's no significant indigenous industry, it's also difficult to find, let's call it private equity or venture capital who have an installed base here. And one of the things, again, the third element of driving the US capability is that it, among one other thing, which I'll touch on, is essential for US private equity or venture capital, is to have a US base.
Yeah.
It meets the criteria for us, Trump tariffs, and they want a US base. They want to invest their money in something that's nearer to them, etc. Interestingly, the biggest thing that after that is AI, artificial intelligence. So what we're working through right now as part of our business plan is a legitimate use of AI to enhance the business. And I think we're there. And in fact, we will be having meetings on Monday whereby we will be defining our AI strategy across all aspects of the business, both now immediate, short and long term, because not all of them can be dealt with. Some of the latter ones require you to be collecting a lot of data for those to work. But I do believe in agentic AI, and I think it will make a significant enhancement to us. And frankly, most of the venture capital money is basically saying to anybody, even with this manufacturing companies, it's got to have AI. It's got to have AI. And it's taken a while to really think through, do you want to be superficial AI or do you really want to make a difference? And that's a challenge, because and there's so much going on in the space that even in the last 3 months, with agentic sort of being more well developed and more spoken about, I really do believe that as we move beyond large language models, that there will be something to do there. So that sort of answers the engaging. We, in principle, within the United States, the Boston area is the most prolific for this type of things. So I think covering those. Just in case the Asia market picks up, which we think it will, given the regulatory, is that we have a partnership with my grandparent company who have labs in Penang, which is probably the second best location in Southeast Asia. If, for example, they put tariffs on US-based products coming out, which probably only natural that might happen. We can supply from Birmingham in the interim, but we are already looking about 18 months out for a location, potentially Penang, to go. People. I mentioned that some of the things we've had to deal with by not having this full-blown indigenous group is really finding really good people. I'm an enormous believer that you find people who are better than you are at the things you want them to do. And that is fundamental. So, that really brings that I can focus on things that not only do I like, but also where I can do things that are outside of what the company does today. We have Chief Technical Officer, Chief Science Officer, fantastic finance people, excellent sales and marketing. I mean, how lucky we've been to land on various people in those specialities. So you've had a sense that my mind moves in mysterious ways towards innovation. I've never created a patent. I probably never will, but I can spot them in other people. And I think I joked with you at one time that the epitaph on my grave would be the commercialization of intellectual property would be my thing. And I can see innovation. I can see probably beyond what the innovator thinks it can do, because I think they do get tramlined and I can take it further. And one of the things that I do is have student as a mentor for students every year. I've done it, I think, now for 14 years. And in principle, we look to Oxford Brookes University and the Santander Scholarship Program. And what I find is it's not innovation, mine is pushing the boundaries, is the way I think I work. So, for example, this summer, we had a young lady who was looking at products in the nutraceutical space for people who are off-ramping GLP-1. Now, we don't have that expertise in-house. We don't really have the time to do it, but thank you, Santander. They pay for the student for about 8 weeks. And what our expectation is very similar to doing a master's level dissertation over those 8 weeks. So it's not just stuff, but we're looking at well-researched clinical studies with references, etc. and then put their ideas in place. What would they think to do? And the young lady who did GLP-1 for this year, who was doing genetics at Oxford Brookes, quite by chance, and it really was, is that most of the ingredients she was coming up with were oil-based. Well, lo and behold, I didn't push her down that road. And so the other Oxford Brookes student was actually looking into oils.
Right.
Now, and quite by chance, the two meshed. That I didn't mesh them together, but the two have meshed together and moved us forward enormously. And that's why I mentioned to you that we're doing dry powder with oils.
Right.
And that's working well. The third student actually was from Bath University, not by Santander. And what I asked her to do was to look at marketing materials if we did lipoactive version.
Right.
And she did a really nice job because my marketing lady is on maternity leave.
Right.
And so, giving her the opportunity to enjoy the time with her new baby. And again, we ended up, and in fact, we are using the marketing materials the lady created for us. And in fact, we've been promoting them on LinkedIn even in the last few days. So, we really are very lucky or specific. We have great projects that we know of every year. And we've done at least 2 now with Santander for at least 4 or 5 years, to the point where I'm glad that they get the good feedback. And so they come to us as almost like a first choice before they go open season for us to say, what are you interested in doing? What projects have you got? What's the sort of backgrounds would you like? I think the biggest change in all of that was that at the beginning, I always used to take master's degree students.
Right.
See, I believe master's is the ultimate expression of education.
Yeah.
Whereas a PhD starts to narrow down. Yeah. You need PhDs, don't understand. But from a company's perspective, I think the master's degree is the ultimate expression. But the number of master's degree students is becoming less in some of these courses. So I'm actually choosing now to work with undergraduates.
Right.
And I thought that would be more challenging. But in the end, with their enthusiasm, clear, very bright, and desire to get on to do something. And I suppose the reality are these are bright people, and what they're recognizing is that internships are probably as important in some respects as the degree for getting on the job ladder.
Yeah.
I watch a program called Wall Street Week, and there are students now at Harvard and Yale who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars getting educated, who can't get a job. They can't even get an internship in the United States because, and you hear it every day, in fact, yesterday, unemployment of young people is rising and opportunities is going down. I think that my role as a mentor is, and remember, I've had fantastic experience of mentorship.
Yeah,
going forward, to go forward. So, if I may just recap one little bit, is that you asked the question that what really set me on the path of being an employee to an employer who wanted to look after people, because in the end, that's what. And I was very fortunate that within Baxter, certainly in my time, there was a program called the Center for Creative Leadership. I think it still exists.
Right.
And I was assigned to go there for a week and got a management coach called Philip Brzezinski, and who is well known in the tennis circles nowadays, amongst the professional tennis people. And the Center for Creative Leadership, you thought was going to bang at you all the things you're supposed to learn at business school.
Right.
The business school does a very good job of that. And what that did was ask you all the questions about you.
Yeah.
What makes you tick? And it's all about 360-degree feedback. And we all don't like it very much, but in the end, it's very revealing.
Yeah.
And what do people say about it? And I found that was probably the catalyst to my career. Now, I obviously had innate opportunities and abilities, but I think it was Philip Rosinski at the Center for Creative Leadership who interpreted what was being said about me and how I said things. And he really focused on something which is not very in vogue for entrepreneurs. I'm supposed to work 60 hours a week. And Philip said, no, you still got to have that thing called the work-life balance. And even yesterday, big entrepreneurs were saying, no, you're supposed to work. But in the end, you've got to be a human being. And I think you've got to treat the people around you as human beings. So maybe I won't be a billionaire and a Musk and these other people. Yeah. But I do believe that if you can leave the world a better place by helping people, that's a great place to go. So really, Absolutely. That's been my journey.
No, well, thank you very much for telling us about that. I think it's absolutely fascinating from sort of how you started out, the corporate beginnings and various roles within corporate life. I do wonder how easily that would be possible to replicate that for any bright young executive coming out these days, whether they're more on the technology and science side or on the business side. But the variety you had was extraordinary, from Syria, Soviet Union places, all that coming together with what sounds like a very exciting future for Sibelius. I would love to know. I know it's going worldwide. You've got colleagues up in Birmingham now, but it's great to hear of an Oxford-based business doing that. So just give us, if there is anybody, somebody listening to this, whether it's perhaps even from an internship point of view or somebody else who might a commercial connection, is the best way to connect directly with you, Peter, on LinkedIn or on the website?
Usually the website. LinkedIn, I'm afraid I'm reasonably selective. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I just noticed you mentioned you're doing some marketing on LinkedIn.
If people want to reach me, I'd rather they wrote to me directly. Right. Okay. Because LinkedIn, I do get lots of inquiries, and of course, lots of service companies use them, and I tend to ignore them.
Okay, we'll note that. Go via the website. And look, we will push this out to our network. We'll work with your marketing people, Peter, to make sure it's widely circled as well. But listen, from Oxford to America, maybe Asia, Sibelius is blending science, sustainability, probably AI and innovation, led by a CEO is really, I love the human side of what you do, as well as the technology and innovation into a real world impact. So congratulations so far. I'm sure Sibelius has a great future. I would love to keep in touch. But thank you very much for your time, Peter. That's been a fantastic story.